Well, thank you, Patrick de Vigian. Fighting against global warming, fighting against poverty, against unemployment, working for health. Each year, we publish the Positive Index of Nations, and Iceland, which was one of the most impacted countries in 2008, came first in the 2017 rankings. So I'm calling on Bjarni Benediktsson, the Icelandic Prime Minister, to talk with Jacques Attali. Please join us.
Conversations, which is of course very short for a long trip that you agreed to do.
Well, I'm happy to be here.
Tell us more. Why do you think that today your country is #1 in terms of looking to the future? It's not only because you have a best index of inequalities or one of the most wonderful nature, but what is in the mind of Icelandic people that explain that you look to the future more than others?
Well, first of all, let me say how happy I am to be here, and I want to congratulate you on this forum and the work that you've been involved with in developing this index, because I do think that looking at things like this index offers is so important, not only for policymakers, but also for us all to kind of relate a little bit better to what politicians are working on and how we can work together as countries to promote better living standards. Now, life has not always been easy in Iceland. I think like 100 years ago, we were probably the poorest country in Europe. But we have been blessed with national resources, and through the years we've been working towards utilizing them on a sustainable level. So almost all electricity for Icelandic households is based on renewable energy. Difficulties that we've had in the past, and let me remind you that only in 2008-09 we had a severe financial crisis. We had to implement capital controls. We had to go to the IMF for financial assistance. But we've come...
And your banker went to jail.
Yes, that's true. Some bankers went to jail. But my point is that times have not always been easy. We have had our difficulties through the years. The financial crisis taught my generation, I'd like to say my generation, a lot about thinking long term. And recently we've passed an organic budget law which imposes upon Parliament and the government to come up with a long-term planning on public finances. We do have a very well-financed pension system.
We'll come back to that.
Yes, and we do look at public finances with our fiscal rules in mind. So I think probably why I'd like to believe, at least, that we've taken our lessons from past difficulties.
But you wouldn't say it's part of a national culture or ideology or mythology of the old Nordic?
I think when it comes to the Nordics ideology, what you will find is common with one Nordic country to the next is the importance of social cohesion.
Yeah.
And that certainly is a factor that helps in this index.
Because this index this is the 4th time that we do it, and first year that you are #1, but it's always Scandinavian countries that are ahead. Norway, Sweden are
That's true.
First.
I think in Iceland we've come a long way in areas such as gender equality. In fact, the current government has a special policy to fight discrimination in wages between the genders. We have had a pretty advanced system for parental leave, which makes for equality between parents. I'd like to say that in the Icelandic labor market, the employers do not ask women more than men about how many children they have or if they intend to have children. And hence, we do have the highest women participation in the labor market in the world.
That's one of the reasons that you are #1, because the index integrate the women ratio participation as one of the key dimensions.
Right.
May I raise 3 points? One is your pension policy compared to other countries. The second would be your policy linked to fish and the sea, which is one of your key resources. And the third would be the inequalities in the country, or the small ratio of inequalities.
Right.
Let's come first to pensions. You are one of a single country in the world where the pensions are really financed, which is not the case in other countries. By the way, France is in the ratio below rank 20, and many things must be done. The minister said it, but you succeed to finance the pensions. How did you do that?
Well, it was originally the obligation to have pensions set aside was an agreement made with the social partners. And it was in part based on past history of high inflation. Could you imagine, for example, that from the time I was 3 years old until I came into university, inflation was every year, always 20% or more. Okay, so in those kinds of circumstances, people start wondering about their future, what they put aside will be worth when they leave the labor market. So we were lucky to have policymakers some 40, almost 50 years ago that made pension payments obligatory. But we've had problems through the past with investing and
capitalization system.
Showing returns, yes. So the simple answer to your question is that there is good understanding between the policymakers and the social partners that a sustainable pension system is a pillar that we want to raise.
On inequalities, the ratio between your salary and the lowest revenue, the equivalent of, in France, the RSA, is something like 7 or 8.
That's true.
And between the RSA and the highest banker is 15.
Just about, yes.
Yeah. Do you think this is sustainable, or do you think that people will say, I cannot stand that, I will leave the country because I want to make a fortune?
I think it is a very important issue. I think you will find that social partners, they put great emphasis on the social cohesion, and with the differences in salaries that we see somewhere around the world, we could not have a peace with social partners in our society. So it is very much an integral part of our society that there is some fairness to the system, and that not only applies to the salary structure, but also for social rights, which are publicly funded. So our social policy or social system is mostly and solely publicly financed. I think this is an important factor, and I do believe it is important that you do include it as you do in the index. And we do follow, for example, the Gini index very closely.
In a very short period of time that we have still left, fish is crucial for you. Sustainable of the sea is a disaster. We are going to talk about it later with other speakers. Do you think that you now succeed to have a sustainable fish environment?
I do. A sustainable fisheries policy is a cornerstone of our economy. What we've been able to do with developing that policy over the past decades is to make sure that we create more and more value. So value creation is something that we've been putting a lot of emphasis on, because there will only be so much tonnage of fish that we can draw from the sea. But if we can find ways through research, development, and the right structure for the fisheries policy to make sure that every kilo of fish that we take ashore will be more valuable for the markets, then we are moving ahead, and we have found a way to create a foundation for better living standards. And this is fortunately happening.
Last question, Mr. Prime Minister. Your country has 300,000 citizens.
It's true.
Would you say that such a same policy or global comprehensive view is possible for a country of 70 million?
I'd like to believe so, yes. In a perfect world, yes.
But in reality?
In reality, I mean, my reality is I look at best examples from all around the world. I like to inform myself about best practices. You know, not everything that we do is of an Icelandic origin as an idea. So we go abroad, we look at what your industry is telling us about what is doing well for others. We look at the OECD reports. We are members of the United Nations. I go all around the world for good ideas. So if you compact a group of good ideas and you say, well, this is a good system, then certainly I do believe that it can be a good exporting product.
Modesty, humility, using best practice. Thank you very much.
Thinking long term, yes. Thank you so much.